welcome. Appreciate your being here today. We are going to talk about Journey to Tomorrow, how a long-term partnership is answering big questions about future readiness. I'm thrilled to be here and to have our panelists with us this afternoon. To my left, Dr. Michael Hinojosa, Superintendent of the Dallas Independent School District, and then Polly Singh, the Senior Policy Officer with the Wallace Foundation, and Byron Sanders, the CEO of Big Thought. Unfortunately, our fourth panelist, Dr. Nicole Pinker, had a last-minute emergency and couldn't fly, so she's not with us today. I know she sends her regrets, and I know she really was excited to be here, but hopefully we can talk about what her work is in this partnership. And obviously you can check out the bios of everybody who's with us today. So what we're here to do is to talk about an ambitious multi-year partnership that the Wallace Foundation has with the Dallas Independent School District, Big Thought, and Digital Youth Network City of Learning to close the opportunity gap for thousands of high-need Dallas public school students while fostering social and emotional learning skills that are going to help them navigate and succeed in school, fulfill their full potential creatively, and foster the competencies they're going to need to succeed as adults in the 21st century. In addition to Dallas, the SEL Future Readiness Initiative is undertaken by Wallace in 5 other cities around the country: Tacoma, Boston, Palm Beach, Denver, and Tulsa. I know Wallace in his work and philanthropy tries to bring about better outcomes for the students they're supporting immediately, while also answering some bigger questions that are going to move the field forward. So Polly, I'd like to start with you by asking, what are some of those questions that you're looking to get at in this initiative?
Sure. So the key question that we're seeking to answer through this initiative in partnership with Dallas and the 5 other communities we're working with is that if schools and their out-of-school time partners focus on social emotional learning, do students benefit? What does that look like in terms of adult practice? What does that look like in terms of setting up the systems to address those changes? And what sorts of outcomes can we expect to see over time? And we actually arrived at this question through a number of iterations of previous initiatives that looked at after-school systems. Can systems be created in urban settings to increase access and participation in high-quality out-of-school time programming? In our Arts Learning Initiative, and unfortunately Dallas has been a part of our Arts Learning Initiative and our most recent Summer Learning Initiative, where we looked at, in Arts Learning, can cities create systems to increase the access into arts learning programming? And most recently in our Summer Learning work, we focused on, can districts and out-of-school time intermediaries create summer learning programs, and what sorts of impacts can we see for student outcomes? And that's where we saw the emergent evidence of SEL, so that we can have impacts on math and reading, but SEL started to emerge through that work. We further tested that with the Chicago Consortium for School Research, Foundations for Young Adult Success. All of our work is published on our website, of course. All of our findings are published and readily available on our website, so you can access it for free, and it's readily available. But in all of this initiative and the work that I've just described, we seek benefits both for the partners that we work with, our grantees, as well as for the field larger, so that they can benefit from the learnings that we've had.
Great. Well, one thing that Polly mentioned and we do want to talk about, and that's the nature of these long-term partnerships, and that certainly is, as she said, the situation between Wallace and Dallas. And that did start in 2006 when the district, with the help of the Wallace Foundation, provided high-quality arts instruction district-wide for all of its students. And Dr. Hinojosa, I know you're in the unique position of looking at that perspective because you were the superintendent, I believe, from 2005 to 2011. Left, went to Cobb County, Georgia, and then returned to his hometown of Dallas in 2015. That's a pretty long marriage with you guys now that you're back. So how has that relationship changed over time? Why do you think Dallas is in a great position right now to, why are you the right place for Wallace to be making this investment? If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, well, Wallace has been best in class in a lot of different things. And the thing about Wallace is they're very strategic and they're very focused, and they research everything, and they bet on things that have great outcomes. And the arts sometimes You know, in Texas, we're the godfathers of accountability. And so we threw out everything except for math and science, and then took it nationwide with No Child Left Behind, and people forgot about the arts.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if you believe in the whole child, you're making bad decisions for the long term based upon chasing the score. And so when Wallace came into that space, and then a lot of things people don't know about Dallas. You see the beautiful city when you fly in, but we have 155,000 students. We are the 15th largest district in America, but we're the 5th largest city district. What's the difference? Well, Miami's bigger than us, but it's Miami-Dade County. Hillsborough is bigger, but it's Tampa and Hillsborough County. Fairfax is all of suburban, Virginia. So, and 90%, we never apologize for our demography. 90% of our students are economically disadvantaged. 45% of our students are English learners. We have more English learners than El Paso has students. When you put that into that kind of context, our kids need the summer opportunities, and they need opportunities because we don't want it to be the tale of two cities. We want everyone to prosper in Dallas's prosperity. But if you don't even have those opportunities for your students, how can they live the beautiful life of the Arts District of downtown Dallas? Part of it was, quite honestly though, was brand with both of these institutions. Our brand was not very good. In the 90s, Dallas had 7 superintendents in 10 years. Luckily, the guy before me was Dr. Moses, and he was my mentor, and he stayed 3 years and he made the job doable. But before that, it was 5 superintendents in 5 years, and one of them went to federal prison. So we didn't have a brand that was very good. But what happened with Big Thought and with Wallace, we were able to attach to something that was good, that was sound, that was quality. And over time then, we corrected our errors, and our errors were correctable. And now our students have benefited. And now I left and came back. I was so pleased that the relationship flourished and stayed while I was gone. And so now we have a much better chance for long-term success as we've discovered these things. But it was their brand that helped us get our act together and now have a fighting chance for success going forward.
Byron, I know that you also have a long relationship with Wallace, and in fact, Gigi Antonio, your former CEO for 21 years, is now at Wallace, is their director for learning and enrichment. As the nonprofit program provider, can you talk a little bit about your piece in that partnership and how Wallace has helped you achieve your goals, which are very much about the opportunity gap in the arts and creative potential?
Absolutely. So, with Big Thought, we have evolved over the years, and every step in our evolution has been as a function of partnership. When we first started, we actually weren't even called Big Thought. We were called Young Audiences. So if anybody's familiar with the national network of Young Audiences, it was strictly arts education, bringing the arts back into the schools. Powerful, a mission in and of itself worth doing. But the thing that happened is, because of we opted into a deep relationship with Dallas Independent School District. And we opted into that even in spite of, the previous brand issues that Dr. Hinojosa had talked about, because we truly do believe that if we're going to be an effective organization in our city, you can't run from the largest institution in our city, right? That is our pipeline. That's what we had to do. And quite frankly, we think we are fortunate and blessed to. And every step along the way has pushed us to a new level of service. So we started off with just arts education, and then we got connected with Wallace on how do we build a system by which you can bring the arts to more kids at a high quality. Well, then that question evolved and said, okay, well, if we can do arts education, what about out of school time broadly? So then we got into a relationship and we grew an opportunity to build an out of school time system, which then evolved to, well, what about summer, right? And so each one of these questions, you can see how they were a build, and we got to, the thing that we're so excited about, and Polly just talked about how from summer it's led to the SEL question that Wallace is currently asked. Every step along the way, we've been a closely held partner. But the thing that I would say is unique about Wallace and with Dallas Independent School District is how the partnership has grown, but we all know how it usually happens. You come in, there's funding for a big initiative, you do the big initiative, then the initiative's done, then the thing is gone, right? And everybody looks back with kind, fond memories of what just happened, but it's gone. The partnership with Wallace and with Dallas ISD has had sustainability because of a couple of specific factors. One, I would say leadership matters. If the superintendent is all in on the initiative, it happens, because coordinating is hard. It is hard work, it's messy, it's technical. Also, it's high level technical. You get into the research and the data, but also it's really grinding too. It's boots on the ground, meeting with partners. If we don't have the all-in leadership and buy-in from the superintendent, it's not going to happen. So Dr. Hinojosa has been really critical throughout that entire journey. The other thing is, with Wallace, their approach is unique among funders. They ask the question, but the other thing is they give you space to go out and try some things. They allow you to risk a bit, because any question worth asking, if we know how to do it already, why are we asking it? So they're pushing us to go out and do things differently. And in that relationship, we've been able to try some things that have built the structures for us to be able to have sustainability after Wallace is done funding it. And there's some great examples that we could talk about in just a second. But for us, in our perspective, being that anchor that's a trusted partner between these institutions and the community has been really critical to being able to really make these things come alive, but also exist beyond the end of the funding.
That's crucial. I was hoping you could also talk a little bit, since Dr. Hurd couldn't be here, about what City of Learning's piece is in all of this. And I know that they were deeply involved with summer learning.
Yeah.
And I also know some of the strongest data you have coming out of, the early data coming out of this from student improvement is from the summer learning piece. So maybe could you talk a little bit about that? What is the fourth leg?
Absolutely. Well, it's a perfect case in point of what I was just saying. So the latest initiative that we've wrapped up, we're in the middle of a research project on social and emotional learning. The latest one was with Summer, Dallas City of Learning. And so we were part of a cohort of organizations, and Dallas City of Learning ended up being our summer initiative that we've carried forward. Well, Dallas City of Learning is undergirded by a technology that is supposed to put the agency back into young people when choosing their pathways. That's the unique individual thing that we're going to bring to the table. But when we're talking about what is the system effect, Dr. Hinojosa talked about the tale of two cities with Dallas. We're broken out into northern Dallas and southern Dallas. Southern Dallas is about 60% of the size of our entire city. You could actually fit all of geographic Atlanta in southern Dallas alone. So not only are we big, but we're big and we're spread out. That can present challenges for providing high quality experiences for kids across the entire ecosystem. So what do? Well, it takes a lot of partnerships. It also takes a lot of sophistication, and the technology that we had presented us a ton of data on knowing where the hot spots were, where the cold zones were, so that we, as partners, could then allocate resources to particular places that didn't have a lot of experiences. We've gotten a ton of data back from that because of this technology as well. And so when we go out, we're increasing access, we're increasing the dosage, we're increasing the quality, but we're doing so now at a scale that we'd never seen before. In 2014, when we first began the Dallas City of Learning element of our summer work, I think our total touch point was about 11,000 kids. We just got the data back from 2018 summer, and the total touch point was 96,000 students. And that's a huge chunk of data that we now have. And the beautiful part about it is, because we now have an infrastructure that captures enrollment, captures our partners' programs and where they are, we've been better capable of linking that experience back to what's happening in the school space. And we have some very early data. I call it early data because we have one summer, right? But 2017 showed that when we were looking at a huge chunk of, a huge sample of students in Dallas ISD, where we have student level identifiers that have been captured in out of school time settings, which in and of itself is a very difficult task, we were able to see that there was a GPA increase from the end of the previous year through Dallas City of Learning, starting in the next year's first 6 weeks. So GPA effect has been able to be attributed to hours participating in summer. And if any of you know about the summer slide, that's a significant achievement, and a significant achievement that was actually done not just with our organizations, but with 600 other partners that we were coordinating with in the city of Dallas.
And it wasn't just quantity, it was quality.
Yeah.
Students had to earn badges to show proficiency, and so things were being stacked up. Simultaneously, we've developed a long-range facilities and technology master plan, and we're starting to roll that out. So all the work that was done in the summer can now be augmented with our year-round program during the school year.
And building on
Yeah.
those lessons from summer, what we were able to do is create the Summer Learning Toolkit, which is hosted on our website for practitioners to use. These are tools that Dallas created, Boston, and other communities in the initiative created and used on an ongoing basis throughout the initiative. Now they're readily available on our website. There's guidance provided there. It's called summerlearningtoolkit.org, and it's just there available for free so that you can draw down and use them.
That's terrific. You mentioned the challenge of being able to follow these kids. So you're following them from in-school enrichment, right, out of school time programming, and then summer learning, and you're being able to see how that kid is doing, right, how that student is doing. Has that been able to, you've been able to refine some of the stuff that you're offering, or how you're approaching it based on that information?
It's a really good point. It does allow us to be more targeted because the research partner in this is SMU Center on Research and Evaluation. They've come in, they brought their big data capability and added it to this system in some of the later years, and it's the thing that's given us the sophistication. What we now have, though, is the promise of being able to connect these contiguous experiences, because at the end of the day, it's one kid, right? We break it down into this is after school, this is daytime, this is summer, this is weekend, but it's one contiguous experience. And as you've seen in a number of the conversations that have been going on over the course of the conference, if you're talking about 21st century ready, it's much more than just transcript. And so how do you make sure that we're connecting the dots? Now we have an infrastructure that allows us to amplify and bring out of school time experiences tied to the things that are happening in the classroom. And particularly, we've been able to layer this onto other systems that are working really well in Dallas right now, like Dallas County Promise. Dallas County Promise is one of the most powerful systems, and Dr. Hinojosa, if you want to talk a little bit about Dallas County Promise, we can talk about how we are using the system to even uplift that.
And the Dallas County Promise is that since so many of our students are economically disadvantaged, if you promise to fill out your FAFSA, and that we will get you in and through community college for free, and go to even the four-year university, University of North Texas at Dallas, and they'll do last dollar. So if you don't qualify for some of these grants, they'll do last dollar. So the promise is that if you do what we ask you to do and go through that process, you can get your bachelor's degree for free. Every student in Dallas County, and that's the opportunity. And we paired that with our P-TECH program, where in every high school in Dallas, you can get your associate's degree for free before you graduate from high school, and you're paired with American Airlines, you're paired with AT&T, you're paired with Accenture, you're paired with Microsoft as part of your P-TECH program. Now this changes, and now the kids have been doing this in the summer, after school, and now they're aligned with an industry partner, and so you have a complete path. But just like we're very unique that it's us three working together, same thing with myself, the community university president, and the community college chancellor. We work together, and that's another thing that it's difficult to replicate in other large cities.
And what we are now doing is we're using the system that was built with the Wallace partnership and with Dallas ISD to accomplish one of the other objectives in this really important new system, relatively, because this is the second year of Dallas County Promise in operation. Well, signing the pledge is a key component to greenlighting that free college. What we're doing now, one of the objectives was how can we get kids to sign the pledge earlier? Well, we have this big ecosystem where we've captured, again, 96,000 students over the course of the summer. Wouldn't it be great if rising 8th graders in that ecosystem get access to the pledge in the summer through all of the partners, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Dallas Parks and Rec, now as a function of the things that they do to be a participant in Dallas City of Learning, they present the pledge to rising 8th graders. So we're starting to get rising 9th graders, people who just finished their 8th grade year, 9th graders being able to sign the pledge earlier so that it becomes part of the norm and culture of going on and understanding that this is going to be part of your pathway. And that's how these systems, it's sustainability. It's more than just continuing what we did. We're able to build on its utility, and it's starting to scope and scale through in places that we didn't even know we would be able to use it.
But let me add one thing. During Hinojosa 1.0, we didn't have that brand with those 70 industry partners.
That's right.
But because of Big Thought and because of the reputation of Wallace during Hinojosa 2.0, we now have 77 industry partners that have signed a memorandum of understanding as to how they're going to collaborate with us at our schools to get our kids. And most of those are IT type businesses to have the kids ready at the end of the pipeline.
People want to be with Dallas ISD these days, huh?
Not always.
But now they do. Well, just to broaden this for a second, Polly, you're doing this, as I mentioned at the beginning, in 5 other cities. I don't think all those cities have the community partners, right? What are some of the differences you're seeing in some of these other places, and is this the optimal model for this?
Well, I think every city is doing what's optimal for them. Okay. Dallas is doing what's optimal for Dallas. And we have not gone in the way that Byron described earlier. We're not the foundation that goes in and says, we'll build it, we'll do this for a short amount of time, and then we'll leave, and then the work just goes away. We want the work to be institutionalized. And so in each community, they're leveraging existing resources and bringing them to bear and seeing what are the new facets that need to be created. In the case of Dallas, they're able to leverage existing resources, the Dallas City of Learning. They're able to build on institutions like Dallas ISD. We have Big Thought. I know the Department of Parks and Rec is also a major provider in the SEL initiative. So what are existing, and in each community, it manifests different. So there are some communities who are connecting it to their collective impact initiatives and so on and so forth. And so in this way, we're able to look at what are the people, the process, and the data within each of these systems, and how could they each be leveraged and brought to bear on a community by community basis.
And let me build on that. Because of this infrastructure, it was natural for us to dive into the social emotional learning piece. But we're not best in class in SEL yet. I mean, Austin and Cleveland have done phenomenal things in social emotional learning. The rest of us, Boston and the other cities that are Tacoma and others, we're learning together, but we have this infrastructure that allows us to then move more quickly into the social emotional learning space, which our employers tell us, future ready workers. They need kids who are resilient. They need kids who are going to be able to power down if they feel the emotions. They need people that can get along with other people on the job. Those are the kind of skills that we're all learning together. And one thing, I make mistakes at full speed, and I want to go faster. But sometimes you have to have the data before. Yes. The smart people tell me, you want me to tell you where you make the mistake before you make it or after you make it? I don't care, just tell me, but we're moving. So it's good to have smart people temper you when you go out crazy.
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about SEL, and I was looking at your plan. I know you talked a little bit about Dallas, but I just want to give some people some more background. So the poverty gap in Dallas is one of the largest and fastest growing in nations for cities over 1 million. In 2014, 125,000 children in Dallas were living in poverty, and 50,000 were living in extreme poverty. Children raised in poverty live with toxic levels of stress and on a daily basis are faced with overwhelming challenges that affluent children never have to confront. Their brains have adapted to suboptimal conditions in ways that undermine good school performance. Adults working with youth dealing with effects of toxic stress are also experiencing stress of their own that can negatively impact the culture and climate of the school or classroom and perpetuate the youth's barrier to learning. So how do you see your SEL plan, which I think you want to have district-wide every grade level by 2025?
I want it sooner than them, but
Well,
they're
that's
telling me I
that
gotta
Russian,
wait till
right?
2025.
That you just talked about. How do you see it addressing those conditions, and how is, again, your partnership with Wallace helping you hit that goal?
They're very disciplined, and you know, we have a control group and a study group, and you know, and so we're learning this. And usually my board doesn't get along with each other, but they're 100% unanimous behind this project. They passed a policy. They're committed to it. We have a great partner with it. And then just the implementation. We decided we'd start with the adults so that the teachers would know how to deal with it before we took it to the students. And you know, just, I mean, the only frustration is that we're not going fast enough, because it's such, all the other schools that are not in the treatment of the control group, they say, what about us? Where's the good stuff for us? Same thing that happened with our P-TECs. That's why Dallas County Promise came up, is because those P-TEC kids were getting a free degree, but what about the rest of the kids? So that's kind of an interesting phenomenon, but that's the cost of doing business, and you got to do things right. And so we're very pleased with our progress so far, and we've dedicated staff to it because it's important to fund the infrastructure to make these things work long term.
So this year has been dedicated to the adults, right, as you said?
Well, year one, we're in year two, we're now getting down to the students, but yeah, we had to start with the adults. If the teachers don't know the concepts, then it just blows up on you if you don't start with the adults.
So, Polly, same question to you. How has the Dallas ISD work helped deepen Wallace's knowledge of this? Because I know you're interested in this across the board.
Right. So Dallas's work works for what's happening in Dallas, right? And so they're adding to the demographic setting of all of the other communities in the system. So what works in Dallas might not necessarily be the same elements that work in a Boston or Tacoma or Tulsa. It's sort of like, how do you like your chicken? Mm-hmm. To phrase it, when we've worked in other city initiatives, when you go to, or how do you like your barbecue, since we're talking about Texas, right?
I like chicken and chicken.
How do you like your,
That's right.
and how do you prepare it? What spices do you use? How does it present itself? You have the same ingredients, but whatever the dish you end up with looks different from city to city, context to context. And so this phase right now, as Dr. described, is our R&D phase. What does it work? How does it work? What does it take to put these elements in place? How do they come together? What does it look like? And you really get that chance to strategize and to make strategic decisions based on the data that you get in this early phase. And yes, it's 4 years in the early phase, but that's when you can really identify and go back and look again, so that as you go forward incrementally over time, you can make lasting change.
Okay. I used the word marriage earlier, and we all know no one's is perfect. So I know you all enjoy collaborating and you respect each other's roles, but there has to be points of conflict and conflicting demands and interests. What are some of those pain points in a partnership, and how do you get past them?
Well, they're always important. We've been very lucky that there has not been a big churn in leadership. A big thought. Gigi was there for so long, and now Byron, he knows us, he knows the community, and he's coming on board. So that's been good. What you worry about when you get a long-term partner is, what's going to happen when the CEO changes. Yeah. Just like our partnership with us at Community College in the 4-year. What happens when the CEO changes? Same thing with Wallace. They're steady, they're strong, they've been doing it. If we have a disagreement, we have such a healthy working relationship, we just go have a conversation. And my team works with Big Thought's team at the mid-management level and at the other parts on a regular basis. They co-create, they co-present, and they work out the problems so it doesn't end up on my desk. A good way to get along with me is don't let your stuff end up on my desk. So they handle all the stuff before it gets to me, so that I don't have to get involved. And it's just, but we have that healthy of a relationship and respect. but that's not perfect. You know, there are some disagreements, just like, you know, if we're gonna do something at scale, you know, it can become a strategic initiative, but then there is no option. You gotta do it at scale. So you know, sometimes you have to just back off a little bit and say, okay, let's make the best of the situation that we have. But there's fussing and discussing behind the scenes. But when we get to those big, beautiful funders in Dallas, they think we always just sing Kumbaya, because we sing that together.
Absolutely.
And another key partner, though, that hasn't been mentioned is the city of Dallas. And the mayor and the city council and the arts department and all of those people in the city we meet with the city manager and his senior staff on a regular basis, and we work all these things out behind the scenes, and so it doesn't get to the elected officials. But you got to have a healthy respect for each other to be able to work that way.
You know, and I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we run into oftentimes is just making sure that, you know, we do a ton of work together as systems partners, but none of this gets done without partnerships, right? And so our partners oftentimes go into the community. How do we make sure that the community understands what we're working on? And how do they feel like a vested partner in this work as well? Sometimes that's a challenge, right? Because you have your template, you have your model, and then you get out there and it's time to translate. And sometimes that is difficult, because what if you're in a community that doesn't necessarily align exactly with your research question or your timeline?
How do you do that?
Exactly. Well, what you do is you bring them in early and you talk to them often. We do a lot of our work. A great example of that work happening in Dallas City of Learning, we have convenings with our partners. We actually do a professional development called the KICS Conference, which is all about making sure we get our partners in a room together so that they're cross-pollinating, connecting the dots, and working together in those spaces. And I'll tell you, you know, Wallace is great about getting district and intermediary organization together in very intentional and strategic spaces, often multiple times. So Dr. Hinojosa just came, he flew here from a Wallace convening of superintendents.
In New York,
In
right?
New York City.
In New York
My
City,
hometown.
right? So, you know, it's transcontinental. Like we do all of this work consistently and often in order to get past those barriers and those hiccups that might show up. Because they do, we need to be vigilant so that we can take care of them as they show up.
And if we have a nonprofit who's not stepping up
Yeah.
or not delivering, it doesn't matter whether we talk to them or you talk to them, but we got to talk to them, and
Yeah.
we got to figure out how to get that corrected to be able to move forward.
And you have hundreds, right? You have,
Yes.
you have like
Just
600.
a couple. No, but that's what makes it beautiful. We've got so many people to buy into these things. Think about how difficult that is. Like I said, y'all, Dallas is huge. And when you're talking about North Dallas, it almost looks like a different world from, you know, the Vickery Meadow community versus the Pleasant Grove community. But for everybody to be rowing in the same direction, that takes a lot of effort. And it speaks to, I think, the quality of the Wallace name, but also, I think, the quality of the process that we have to go through for the community engagement.
Great.
Yeah.
I think it's all of the things that you just heard, but I think the crux of it is, what better way do we get to teach kids than to model it, right? Model what collaboration looks like, model what team building, being in a team, being a member of a team, and fully being at the table, having your voice heard and represented, instilling agency in young people. I think that's ultimately where, when we collaborate and do it well, that's what we're modeling for the young people, and that's where we want to go.
Absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about what the kids actually do. And if I were a kid growing up in Southern Dallas right now, which is the part of the city, Byron, where you grew up and which you...
Me too.
You too?
Yep.
Byron described it as an experienced desert. So, and if my life was touched by this initiative, what would I look back in 15 years and say, I got to do this when I was a kid and it changed my life?
It's a great point, and particularly with the social emotional learning work that we're doing now. I'm going to tell you, one of the challenges with social emotional learning, as many of you all might have experienced yourselves, is getting belief sets to change amongst the adults. Dr. Hinojosa made a reference to this previously. When you're trying to get someone to buy into SEL strategies, oftentimes it's not difficult because you're teaching them a new skill that they have to master. Sometimes we have to acknowledge that this is in direct conflict with how they might have been raised. And I'm just talking with you about my own upbringing, right? Why are you crying? You know, that's like, what, you know, toughen up, right?
Yeah.
Just deal with it. Punch through. All of those things, that was grit. And you got grit because somebody told you to have it, right? That's where you got it from. We're in a new world now.
Yeah.
And so when you bring these new concepts to somebody, you're not just teaching them something new, you're teaching them something that their mother might not have done or might have actively disagreed with. We're in the Bible Belt, so for some of you all who don't know, even saying things like mindfulness or saying yoga, you'd be amazed at how many people were like, you know, not in this God-fearing house, right? You know, that's like a real thing that shows up. So when you're starting to bring these new concepts, you have to really connect with culture. You have to really think about what that is. And so for a kid I am excited about the notion that we're starting to make more mainstream these concepts that research and evidence has been backing for a long time. And we're figuring out how to do it in different communities. Case in point, when you're talking about social and emotional learning, for me growing up, you call me friendly and that was an insult. That in some of our communities, like, hey man, that kid's acting really friendly. Like being nice is actually a threat. You make yourself a target.
Suspect.
You're soft.
Yeah.
Right? Well, wouldn't it be a beautiful world where a kid is able to recognize their full humanity, their feelings, be able to then talk about them, and God forbid, be able to help somebody else work through it as well? That's a better world. And for me, I went through some things as an adult that I don't think I would have struggled as much with if I knew social emotional strategies and I knew it was okay to lean into and discover how trauma has affected me. I grew up in a house of domestic violence. I grew up in a household where, you know, my dad was around, but he was in and out. I grew up in college. I made a mistake that actually got me kicked out of school. The kid who had done everything right. And I didn't know how to handle it. And I had to go through a dark period of time. But thank God, I had some mentors. I had some of those buffers that we talk about in social emotional learning. But I had to go through this stuff as an adult. And you know, I would have saved myself a lot of time, a lot of heartache, and some of my other relationships a lot of heartache if I had learned these skills earlier. And for us to be making it the norm right now, I think it positions kids of color in particular and kids who've grown up in low-income areas in a much better way to own their voice, to lean into their full story, not be ashamed of it. Many times kids don't like to talk about where they're coming from. Once they finally even do get to college and they start talking about their resumes, they try and run away from that. They can own their whole self, step into life as their full self, and I think in doing so, increase their power.
And I would add
Please.
a couple of things. You look at the title of this session, long-term future readiness. That's what you're trying to build. From the experience those kids live, you're trying to build long-term future ready. Some kids have agency because they just have it. Some of their parents have all the agency. And some kids don't have it at all. And those are the ones that are not prospering in our city. And so somehow, that's really what that child needs to go through. And it's the whole child.
Yeah.
In a state that is really heavy-handed on accountability and, just how you do on a paper pencil test one time a year.
How you were just with all your fellow superintendents in New York, as we mentioned. What are you hearing about this subject with your peers?
There's a lot of excitement, and the fact that a few districts have done it well at scale, and the fact that so many others are now looking into it, and we need to make sure that social emotional learning becomes more than a buzzword.
Yeah.
That it becomes meaningful and real. And I think by this research, we'll be able to show people the path forward. But there's genuine excitement because it's not you're just, like on our own, we have a school performance framework that's even more rigorous than the state's accountability. Our school gets rated on 50% on state accountability, 30% on growth is how much did you move the needle from the time you had them, and then 20% is culture, climate, and survey. The students get feedback on what we do our surveys of students, staff, adults. So we believe in the whole child, and so I think some of us that have been around long enough, we know we're accountable, but you got to do more than that to help a student if you want long-term, future-ready kids. That's what you got to do. You got to do the whole piece.
Do you want to add to this at all about,
What I will add that what Byron described, he's really talking about in research what we call the integrated identity, right? So that is when you're bringing your whole self. I'm Indo-Caribbean American. I was an immigrant child. I lived illegally here in the United States when I first came. I grew up in the South Bronx. Having the opportunity to talk about what does it mean to collaborate? What does it mean to have agency and to represent and to be your whole self and bring that to a conversation? I think that's what will be transformative about this work. There is potential there for sure, and we have the and because we're taking this as a learning journey and collaborating, that's when we're able to embed it even further and to really go really deep with what we learn.
Definitely.
And the other good thing about Wallace, they've told us, if we're studying the wrong stuff and we made a mistake, okay, so be it. Others, foundations have pushed certain things and then they said, oops, that didn't work. And even though they're trying to make it work, it didn't work. So that's very refreshing that, hey, we're going to find out if this stuff is really real or not.
Well, we're supposed to treat failure and success as the same, right? Isn't that the message?
That's right. And the thing is, we know how it works. We're all hip to the game. If there's a huge pot of money out there and they're saying, hey, this pot of money is for this specific thing, I'm like, I do that thing. I do that. I've done that thing for years. Let me figure out some things out and I'll get a proposal to you, right? Like that's how it happens.
Yeah.
And because Wallace comes in with not saying do this thing, but asking a question and then allowing you to structure and you to identify what's going to be best, like Polly said, for your community, man, it's a breath of fresh air. Oh, and then you can go back to them and tell them that what you did didn't work. And they're like, okay, I'm not pulling funding. I'm going to work with you through it. That's different. And that's why I think the long-term partnership has really worked. And the thing that I want to really highlight is this. When you do that, I told you we went from 11,000 to 96,000. The largest growth that we saw was actually after they were funding us. They were done funding us when we were able to really capitalize and take that system, that summer system to the next level. But it's because of all the work that was done, building the infrastructure, testing stuff that didn't work and really figuring it out. And again, that's just a credit to their approach, which is why we love working with them.
When we talk about future readiness and SEL, I think a lot of people are talking about work readiness and issues of that, but the other piece to this is really a creativity piece.
Yeah.
And we're talking about kids not just being able to succeed in school, but also sort of tap into their fullest potential as creative beings. That's what it started with an arts component and now it's spread and it's gone beyond that. So can we talk a little bit about that? So, that's when I was thinking about, well, this kid, I remember when I was 12, I got to be in a play or I got to, to tap into that, and that can definitely change your life.
I think I would like, when I came back, one of the other things that very seldom is mentioned, when I met with the board and we planned what we were going to do the next few years, one of our goals was that we wanted every student to be involved in an extracurricular activity. We didn't care if it was chess, we didn't care if it was choir, we didn't care if it was football, and the most amazing thing that has come from that is now we have 300 robotics teams, and the kids have just fallen in love with the robotics thing, and it's natural and they love it. And part of that is, and that's what, That's where we started this journey with,
Yeah.
with
Full circle.
this. It's been amazing how it's now coming. Now we've got momentum, and you learn how to be creative when you're involved in the great STEM programs, and it's not just sit and get. And so I think that's been very powerful. Even from our early part of our marriage in 06, when we started with the arts partners, and we've just taken this over. Hey, look how long, 06, you know, my mustache was all black.
Ancient history.
To illustrate the point that we're talking about, one of my good friends, Lisa Atherton, she's a CEO and president CEO of Textron Systems, Bell Helicopter, Cessna, right? So they're a multinational organization, does a lot of really big work for the Defense Department, all that jazz. Well, they were trying to get their mechanical engineers to redesign the cockpit for a helicopter. And they needed to deliver, and they needed to take it up a notch. They went through multiple iterations, and all they kept getting to were tweaks. They kept getting to tweaks, and it wasn't enough. So what did they do? They went out, and they kept their mechanical engineers, but they went out and hired a bunch of video gamers, video game design. They also brought in some graphic artists and creative designers, basically ideators, and then they put them together. They worked in a fraction of the time. They came up with some off-the-wall stuff that looks like Minority Report, right? Like just some very futuristic interface that's completely reinvented what this cockpit looks like for the pilots, and now they're, again, being very competitive. So you think about what they had to do in that, right? The mechanical engineers, let's think about what they probably did for their education. They probably, like, hey, you're a math guy, right? Or math lady, usually math guy, because that's what we say to boys instead of girls, oftentimes, which is another issue. But hey, why don't you're probably good in engineering. So they kept going and they kept going, and they only kept taking engineering classes and engineering classes and engineering. And what oftentimes is lost is the creative component, the creative muscle is built from multiple disciplines, and having access to multiple disciplines, multiple topics, multiple things that invest in your humanity, and then you're able to make these connections between a lot of typically disparate ideas and concepts. Wouldn't it be great if we had mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and future engineers who are capable of thinking outside that box, just as a form and function of their default way that they attack problems?
Perfect example, Conrad High School has an industry partner, GameStop, and SMU Guildhall, you can get a graduate degree in gaming at SMU. They're the industry partner at Conrad High School. It's a niche for those kids, and you can choose to go to that school or not. But for those kids, they're going to get what Byron just described.
Exactly. So when we start to do that, we're also preparing them for a world that's so dynamic we can't define it. Because 65% of kids today are going to be working in jobs that don't yet exist. That's from the U.S. Department of Labor. So how are you going to tell an 8th grade teacher, teach them exactly what they're going to need to know in 10 years? Right? Tell that to somebody who was teaching a kid, then the iPhone came out. Now what? Right? The world is completely different. If you give them access to creative exposition, then you're building a skill set, the resiliency, to be able to step into a world that we can't yet define. Because it's evolving at such a much more rapid clip. That's actually the only sustainability that we have for human beings in the workforce, given where technology is going.
Well, last question, and we're talking about the future, so I'm going to ask this to Polly. These are really complex issues to deal with adults and students' emotional well-being. What are you hoping is going to push forward from this Dallas initiative? And I know you said every place is different, but I think sometimes we look at big urban districts, we think they're dinosaurs, we think there's no great hope there, but there are dynamic things happening. So what is the message you'd like to take away to move forward for other places that are thinking about this stuff?
I think that data and looking at data and spending the time that Dallas has been spending to reflect and thinking about using that to inform what is the next step, what can we look back on and learn from to move forward, knowing that there's so much to learn from when you look back. I think in all of that, and because there are institutions, when you think about the people, process, and data, knowing that there is permeability when you start to ask questions. who is left out when you look at the data?
Yeah.
What processes are not addressed? What's been left out? Who are the people that need to be engaged that are not at the table? Those are the kinds of questions that I'm hoping through this initiative we'll start to identify. What are they? Who's missing? What is missing? And how can we do this strategically in a way that will bring in everyone so that they are included? And I do want to answer your earlier question.
Yeah.
In terms of 15 years from now, I want kids to remember that they learned empathy. They learned to be resilient. They learned that, okay, you know what, this morning I had a really bad bus ride, but I knew to take a moment to myself to say, I can breathe and I can move on and I can reflect and say, you know what, that was at this morning and it was an isolated event, but next thing will be better and I will make it better. But those are the kinds of skills that I want kids to learn through this initiative and to grow from. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity here.
Thank you. Well, I actually had a bad moment myself because I never introduced myself. I'm so sorry. So my name is Kathy Moore. I'm an executive editor with the 74. We're a digital news site that covers education in America. Thank you all for coming this afternoon. Thank you all for being here, particularly getting on a flight from New York. And I hope you found it worthwhile. Good afternoon.